In mid-2026, three private companies began finalizing plans to go public. Their combined projected valuations rival the annual economic output of a large national economy. These entities, Anthropic, SpaceX, and OpenAI, represent the most valuable cluster of private listings in history. Historically, immense wealth has converted directly into public influence. A century ago, tycoons acquired newspapers and television networks to control which stories reached the front page and which narratives were amplified to the masses. Research by political scientists Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page examined nearly 1,800 policy questions to track the result. Their data indicates that organized business interests and economic elites exert a measurable effect on policy outcomes, while the preferences of average citizens have little to no independent influence. These listings represent a move into the infrastructure of human thought itself. We are moving past the era of firms that broadcast information and into an era of firms that own the substrate of search, reasoning, and daily persuasion. Material inequality is a quantity we can measure with math. We know the top 10% of the global population captured 52% of all income in 2022. But when that gap migrates into the domain of public voice, the effect is structural rather than just financial. The economist Kaushik Basu argues that extreme economic disparity exerts a silencing effect on the general public. When a few actors can shape the channels through which a society talks to itself, the ability of ordinary people to be heard erodes. Basu calls this voice inequality. It describes an environment where formal political rights remain intact, but the practical space for forming opinion and shaping policy has been captured by concentrated capital. In this reading, the financial wealth gap casts a political shadow. It dictates who governs the modern public square, determining which ideas are heard and which are quietly filtered out. These firms provide what researchers call the cognitive substrate. These are the underlying systems billions of people use to search for facts, summarize complex documents, and draft the arguments used to persuade others. This influence relies on a bottleneck, advanced computing power. It sits between massive capital and the AI models mediating discourse. Researchers note three traits making compute a control lever. It is detectable, excludable, and produced through a concentrated supply chain. Owning this bottleneck allows a few private actors to set the technical defaults for the models. They gain the capacity to downrank information or amplify specific viewpoints at the application level, away from public view. As these models become the defaults inside search engines and public services, the technical question of who sets their weights becomes a political question. The owners of the compute substrate determine whose voice is built into the tools of everyday life. The shift from private, closed-door labs into the public market infrastructure introduces a conflicting set of rules. Public status imposes obligations that private firms avoid. It requires audited disclosure, board oversight, and fiduciary duties, subjecting these powerful entities to continuous regulatory reporting. Anthropic and OpenAI have both adopted public benefit corporation structures. This creates a legal mandate for their directors to weigh a public mission alongside the generation of shareholder returns. Yet the structure of public markets exerts a relentless pressure to prioritize quarterly profit. Shareholder primacy often pulls against any stated mission that doesn't directly contribute to the bottom line. This creates a friction point. Markets enforce transparency and governance, but their demand for constant returns can override the public interest missions these models were built to serve. If no balance is found, our shared reality becomes a product of opaque, profit-driven algorithms. Economic influence will simply translate into a more efficient system for compounding political power. Kaushik Basu proposes a fiscal solution, steeper marginal taxation on high incomes to redistribute wealth and blunt extreme concentration without stifling the innovation these firms represent. On the technology side, governance experts argue for transparency requirements on the compute supply chain and antitrust mandates for system interoperability. These tools are designed to prevent any single firm from locking in a monopoly over human thought. A third path involves supporting open source and public interest models through state funding. This creates a robust alternative to corporate capture, ensuring that plural and contestable voices remain part of the infrastructure. The trillion-dollar listings of 2026 will show whether the slow institutions of democracy, the courts, regulators, and independent civil society, can scale as fast as the power they are meant to hold to account. The question is whether a society can still hear itself think.